Just when you thought Keanu Reeves couldn't have a bigger trilogy than The Matrix, in comes a little action franchise that could, John Wick. The world of assassins is full of deep mythology, great twists, and plenty of epic action moments. Now we're gonna cash in some gold coins to pull back the curtains and reveal some surprising facts about all 3 movies in the franchise. And a quick warning, there will be major spoilers for John Wick Chapter 3, starting with the very first entry. Enjoy! While John Wick movies are filled with fight after fight, they all typically lead up to one epic showdown. To help top the brilliant mirror fight scene in John Wick 2, the production put together a massive glass wall set inside the Continental for John Wick Chapter 3. Just building this room alone cost a whopping $4 million. But we all have to agree, it's definitely worth it. Not only did the room cost millions to make, but Wick gets to destroy most of those glass panels in a fight with Zero's henchmen before taking on Zero himself. The mix of the visuals, colors, and fight choreography make us all ready to upgrade to an 8K TV and watch the film in all its glory when it's finally released on home video. For many people, it's hard to picture Keanu Reeves without him doing his signature quote, "Whoa." While the character doesn't use the quote in any of the John Wick movies, there are a lot of homages to it throughout the trilogy. When the name John Wick is often mentioned to others, listen for a simple and subtle response, a slightly slowed down "oh." The "oh" reaction to the name is supposed to represent the signature "whoa" line, and is almost only spoken in response to hearing something about Wick. While you may not notice on first viewing, the line becomes really apparent once you start looking for it. It's not only a nice homage, but really shows how Wick strikes fear into the hearts of those in this world. The Continental not only provided a safe haven for assassins, but it allowed our characters to interact and converse without the threat of a gun being pulled on them. Unless, of course, you're John Wick and the rules don't matter anymore like we saw in Chapter 2. Either way, for Keanu Reeves, a safe haven like that probably felt a little familiar. In the movie Constantine, Reeves had access to another type of neutral club where no bad things could happen. In the DC Supernatural film, the club was known as Papa Midnights. In the club, people from both heaven and hell could meet up, share drinks, and do not need to worry about the war between good and evil. Sounds like a fun night to us. Keanu Reeves doesn't just show up in these John Wick movies to hold a prop gun and get his face plastered on movie posters. He's there to make the process as authentic as possible, and this includes doing his own stunts. Thanks to longer takes and wide shots with Reeves doing his own stunts, director Chad Stahelski has a lot to play with when planning out the movie and action scenes. There are a couple of small exceptions to Keanu's stunt choices. 1, he won't do anything where he gets hit by a car, and 2, he won't do anything involved with falling downstairs. He leaves those dangerous stunts to the professionals. And a quick fun fact, Stahelski was the stunt performer for Reeves throughout the whole Matrix trilogy, so these guys have definitely bonded over the years. John Wick doesn't just kill hundreds of people in the course of 3 movies, he does it in style. Rivaling James Bond any day, John Wick has a suit that is both fashionable and practical. The suit jacket and pants are made with a bulletproof material. Costume designer Luka Mosca put a lot of thought into Wick's suit and ultimately went with something that was sleek and simple, much like a Glock gun. For John Wick Chapter 2, some tweaks were made to the design, including a higher collar to make John Wick look even more imposing. The simple design and use of blacks also helps add shades of mystery to Wick's character. Is the world of John Wick connected to Batman? While the prospect sounds awesome, the connection is fun, but don't expect to see the Dark Knight perched up in the background of a John Wick scene anytime soon. The connection actually has to do with the Continental. The Neutral Grounds Hotel featured in all 3 John Wick movies may look very similar on the outside. This is because the exterior of the Continental was also used as the exterior for the stock exchange scenes in The Dark Knight Rises. The corner location and dual rising stairs are easily recognizable from both films, although the interiors are clearly different. John Wick vs. Tom Hardy's Bane? Count us in! Keanu Reeves cannot escape his past, and we can't either after seeing so many Matrix connections in these films. We already touched upon director Chad Stahelski's role as a Matrix stunt actor and coordinator. Keanu Reeves also co-stars along with Matrix actors like Randall Duke Kim and Daniel Bernhardt. Not to mention, Lawrence Fishburne came on board to star in both John Wick Chapter 2 and 3. Then there are the little moments and Easter eggs. One of our favorites comes in Chapter 3 when Wick requests
guns. Lots of guns.
The infamous quote from The Matrix.
Guns. Lots of guns.
The moment works in both films, no matter how different they are. Halle Berry was a great addition to the John Wick franchise, and although her screen time was relatively short, she did have a big impact and the potential to expand a lot in future sequels. Berry definitely put her all into the role of Sophia, training for months and getting extremely dedicated to the on-screen partners, her dogs. Berry acted as a dog trainer to her canine companions on set, able to give them instructions, guide them around, and follow the cues as needed. The extra time she took bonding with those dogs clearly shows on screen, especially after one of them gets fatally shot. Berry has praised her time filming the movie and opened up a lot of possibilities for the character and her dogs in the future. When you want to hire a tall and massive actor to play the role of a deadly assassin hunting down John Wick, where do you turn? To the NBA, of course. The league is filled with extremely tall talent, and the filmmakers of John Wick Chapter 3 knew exactly who to call. The production ended up casting Philadelphia 76ers center Boban Marjanovic. Marjanovic was featured in the library fight scene early in the film, towering over Wick through stacks of books. His character was another assassin by the name of Ernest, and he obviously preferred some hand-to-hand combat to try and get a power hold over Wick. Of course, the one-on-one battle for Wick was pretty much a layup, as he destroyed Marjanovic using a book as his primary weapon. Boban Marjanovic wasn't the only larger-than-life athlete in the John Wick movies. In the first John Wick, the Russian bouncer at the Red Circle Club is played by former professional wrestler Kevin Nash. Simply known as Francis, the Russian bouncer clearly has a history with Wick in the past and is set free as Wick enters the nightclub. And even though Nash isn't Russian, he seems drawn to the character type often. In Marvel's The Punisher movie, Nash played another Russian henchman, but unlike John Wick, he got physical in The Punisher, taking on Frank Castle in a one-on-one brawl. John Wick movies may be all about the dogs, but by the time Chapter 3 began filming, it was clear that the cats wanted their due time in the spotlight as well. A big part of the movie was filmed in Morocco, but the filmmakers came across an unexpected obstacle: hundreds of stray cats. Not only were these cats starting to invade the set, but they were posing a threat to Sophia's dogs, distracting them and getting them a little riled up while filming. Once the Blu-ray of Chapter 3 gets released, start checking the high-res background shots to see if any of these stray felines were able to get a cameo. Casting in the John Wick movies always seems top-notch, but there are a lot of considerations along the way. For example, Halle Berry's role as Sophia was initially considered for a number of different actresses, including Marissa Tomei, Jennifer Beals, Penelope Cruz, and Uma Thurman. Who else do you think could have filled the role and done well? In the original John Wick, Ian McShane's role as Winston was first given to Jason Isaac. Although there's been no full explanation given, Isaac eventually left the role, McShane was cast, and he has played the role of Winston ever since. And for John Wick Chapter 3, the role of TikTok went to comedian Jason Mantzoukas. On his podcast How Did This Get Made, he once expressed his desire to star in a John Wick sequel, and his wish came true. Training dogs to act on film is hard enough as it is, especially in a series like John Wick where so many gunshots are blasted off. Now imagine trying to train a beagle puppy to get the perfect shots and bonding moments on film. The young puppy will definitely have a hard time following cues. To help speed up the bonding process, the filmmakers kept things pretty simple. In the scene where the beagle licks John Wick's face to wake him up, Reeves actually had bacon grease rubbed on his face. The scent and flavors had the puppy glued to Reeves and helped make their on-screen bond that much stronger. Once Keanu Reeves signed on to act in John Wick, he developed a lot of story changes and moments to flesh out the character and plot. One of the biggest changes that needed to be made? The age of the character. In the first draft of the John Wick screenplay, originally titled Scorned, Wick was actually around 60 to 70 years old. His dog was also supposed to be around 17 to 18 years old as well. Reeves forced some major changes and reworked the plot so that he would still be a retired assassin, just one who was a little bit younger. Making these changes definitely helped with the action and journey Wick goes on. Plus, we've already seen the old man assassin storyline play out plenty of times in films like Red. In the first John Wick, our hero and title character is often referred to as Baba Yaga, or the one who is sent to kill Baby Yaga. The brief explanation in the movie describes it as the boogeyman, but the fable behind the Baba Yaga goes much deeper than that. The Baba Yaga of folklore refers to a witch who lives in a house made of chicken legs and other chicken parts. The witch is evil, able to trick people, and the stories are essentially told to bring fear into all those who hear them. John Wick cleverly uses this title as a great way to introduce the character and showcase how his past goes much deeper than we could have ever imagined. Besides his perished wife, John Wick pretty much seems like a loner. Sure, he has a few allies throughout the trilogy, but there's no mention of extended family. One question we have to ask, is he related to Tommy Wick? Tommy is a trained fighter who has to deliver a special package to a mobster in the 2013 film aptly titled The Package. Tommy Wick was played by former WWE wrestler and action star Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the shared last name with John Wick is no coincidence. John Wick's screenwriter Derek Kolstad also wrote The Package, purposely giving them both the same last name. So can we expect Stone Cold to join up for John Wick Chapter 4 Meet the Wicks? We certainly hope so. And while the connection to The Package is compelling, John Wick also has a connection to the Mark Wahlberg movie Lone Survivor, but in a very different way. The movie was based on former Navy SEAL Marcus Luttrell, who went through a similar incident as Wick when 4 men came to his house and shot his dog in the front yard. Luttrell chased the men down and caught them, but further violence was prevented by police arrival. The revenge for a dog's death helped propel the story we saw, with many key elements changed and wrapped around the world of assassins. Basic conclusion: no matter what walk of life you're from, don't mess with a man and his dog. If you thought Thanos' snap in Avengers Infinity War took out a lot of people, well, just give John Wick a little more time and he'll start catching up. The body counts in the John Wick trilogy are insane, with each movie racking up more piles of dead bodies than the previous one. So let's break this all down. The first John Wick was definitely high up on the body count, racking up 91 total deaths with 73 with the use of guns. John Wick Chapter 2 upped the ante with 119 total deaths and a whole lot of bullet shells. Chapter 3 raised the bar more than ever before with both guns and knives blazing. The total amount? 167 deaths, 124 by gun. Yikes. The John Wick trilogy may feel like a non-stop action movie, but the heart and soul of the story definitely belongs to Keanu Reeves in a role he was born to play. Reeves gives some of his best performances in the movie, and it turns out that he draws from real-life tragedy to do this. In 1999, Reeves' son was a stillborn after his girlfriend Jennifer Syme went into labor just 8 months into the pregnancy. 2 years later, Jennifer passed away in a car accident, adding even more grief and loss to Reeves' life. He channels these emotions to display the suffering and trauma Wick goes through after losing his puppy and wife within the same week. One of the more interesting parts about the high table and world of assassins in the John Wick movies is the lack of police presence. We don't have to worry about the feds building a case against Wick, undercover agents, or any of the typical cliches associated with these types of movies. Instead, the John Wick movies avoid the police as much as possible with one exception: Jimmy the Cop. In the first John Wick in Chapter 2, we meet Jimmy the Cop, who is pretty much comedic fodder. He investigates a noise complaint when Wick kills off a bunch of men, and then comes to question John when his house burns to ashes due to a grenade launcher in Chapter 2. Because of John's on-the-run status in Chapter 3, Jimmy the Cop doesn't return. It's just a world full of deadly assassins. The pacing in the Wick movies is something to marvel at. The writer and director give you just enough information to follow the story while keeping everything moving at breakneck speed. This is why one of the most important reasons to stay for the credits isn't to hope for a post-credits scene, but it's to learn the character names. In John Wick Chapter 2, Ruby Rose plays a mute assassin who turns out to be a formidable foe against Wick. Once the end credits appeared, we quickly learned her name was Ares, even though it's not spoken in the movie. Many other characters often have basic titles for names. This includes the Administrator, or Lawrence Fishburne's character simply known as the Bowery King. With a name like that, who needs to actually know his first name? In John Wick Chapter 2, one of Wick's biggest foes is Cassian, played by the actor Common. Playing a contract killer is nothing new for the actor. It's a pretty strange role to get typecast as, but Common has appeared as a contracted killer in 3 other movies. His first was in the large ensemble film Smokin' Aces. He follows that up with Angelina Jolie's Wanted in 2008 and the 2015 Liam Neeson film Run All Night. Despite all of this experience as a contract killer, Common still cannot hold his ground against the almighty John Wick. When John Wick defeats some of his biggest foes, they seem to often be at peace as they slowly die. And while hundreds of henchmen die within an instant, these big-time killers often have time to share a few lines with their foe in a dress suit. In the first movie, Vigo says the line, "Be seeing you, John," after getting stabbed. The same line is signed by Ares in the sequel. For Chapter 3, things are changed up a bit, with Zero saying the line, "I'll catch up to you, John," instead. The lines all have a similar theme and have become meme-worthy because of it. So where exactly will they see John? Maybe with his look-alike big-screen character Constantine in the depths of the underworld? Just a guess. John Wick has proven time and time again that he doesn't even need guns to kill his enemies. Through each of the movies, we've got to see some truly unique death scenes, and with some unique weapons to boot. Let's start with John Wick Chapter 3. In the movie, Wick is able to take out an enemy with just a book, and a few horses deliver some deadly kicks of their own. Not to mention, Wick drags a guy to his death by riding on a horse as well. John Wick Chapter 2 had the infamous pencil death scene come to life when two foes are stopped with a trusty number 2. Toss in a few explosions from the first movie, and you definitely have a variety of kills taking out enemies in all sorts of unique ways. The events of each John Wick movie have helped set up a sequel, and the same could be said for John Wick Chapter 3. While we anxiously await Chapter 4 in the series, there are a number of spin-offs and other sequels to consider. Let's start with the big screen first. Producers have already confirmed that The Ballerina is already getting written. The film will follow the assassin school featured in Parabellum and showcase how these students train to become deadly assassins. On the small screen, be on the lookout for a series entitled The Continental, which will follow the events of the safe house for assassins. Both projects are definitely interesting and a great way to expand on the John Wick universe, or the JWU for short.
John Wick may be a man of precision and perfection with a gun and a car, but when it comes to the filmmakers recording him, not everything goes so smoothly. The John Wick trilogy is a collection of 3 nearly perfect action movies, but we can't help but notice some mistakes made along the way, from obvious editing blunders to magically healing cars. Check out some mistakes you missed the first time around and see if you can spot them before the big reveals. After being built up the whole movie, some of the climatic events in the first John Wick involved the final battle between Wick and the crime boss Vigo. In one scene, Vigo manages to get the upper hand on Wick by plowing into the side of his car with an SUV, but the whiplash and maximum force wasn't enough. Vigo continues to push until Wick's car falls off the edge of the docks, flips completely, and lands on the platform below. Did you spot the mistake? Look underneath the vehicle, and you'll see all the internal engine and the components have been completely removed. This is obviously done for safety reasons on the stunt, but the vehicle looks pretty much like a life-size Hot Wheels car. There's nothing like enjoying the comfort of a high thread count blanket or pillowcase, but how high does the count need to be to heal itself after a bullet was shot through? Watch as Marcus aligns his sniper on Wick and then sends a warning shot into the top corner of the pillow. A few moments later, spot the mistake? Yup, the pillow is completely healed with the bullet hole magically disappeared as Miss Perkins shoots John down. When he jumps back across the bed, you can see the pillow with no bullet hole. Someone in the props department really screwed this one up. For this next mistake, it's an easy one to miss because our eyes are probably all welled up with tears. Yeah, we hate to do it, but we gotta go back to the dead puppy scene from the first John Wick film. As Wick awakens, he discovers the poor pooch by his side and gives him a comforting pat on his fur. Or is he? Look at that gentle touch again. Doesn't it look like Wick's hand is floating? Well, it is. The dog and Wick are blended together using some CG magic, but the hand looks like it's floating rather than petting. And at one point, a finger actually disappears beneath the dog's skin in a major editing glitch. The production would have been better off using a stuffed dog prop. The world of John Wick wasn't introduced to us right away. As we followed Wick's journey, little pieces of his history were given, and one of the earliest signs of Wick's past and involvement with the world of assassins was when he made dinner reservations. To do this, he called in the cleanup crew to dispose of the dead men scattered around his house. What could go wrong with a simple phone call? Dial a wrong number? No, phone not plugged in, right? No. The mistake has to do with Wick's dialogue. He makes reservations for 12.
I'd like to make a dinner reservation for 12.
But if you watch the home invasion scene again, Wick actually kills 13 goons. Guess someone isn't going to have a spot at the dinner table. The kills come so fast, it's only natural for Wick to lose count. One of the great cameos in the John Wick franchise comes in the first movie, when former WWE superstar Kevin Nash plays the club bouncer Francis. As Wick and Francis catch up before the massive club shootout, Francis reveals that he's lost some weight, over 60 pounds to be exact, according to the stylish subtitles anyway. Well, unless you're fluent in Russian, this is one mistake you will easily miss. While speaking Russian, Francis's words translate to 20 kilograms, which is actually only 44 pounds. We'd love to confront Francis about this tall tale, but he never appeared in the franchise again. Maybe John Wick Chapter 4 would be a good time to bring him back for some great action and a little clarity on his weight loss numbers. The funeral scene in John Wick is as dark and dramatic as it gets. Rain pours down. The New York City skyline is in the background, and you can feel John's pain as his wife's casket is lowered into the ground. During the whole scene, John Wick holds an umbrella, but there's something strange about the poor weather accessory. When he talks with Marcus, pay attention to the ribs underneath the umbrella. Those are the metal wires extending out from the center of the umbrella. For a majority of the shots, the umbrella has 8 ribs, but during a couple of shots, the umbrella completely changes, featuring one that is much wider and with over 20 ribs. The larger umbrella makes sense, considering how hard it's raining, but there was no way he could have switched umbrellas so quickly. With so many quick shots and bullets flying everywhere, it's easy for the John Wick production to miss a few errors through filming and editing, especially in the hectic home invasion scene. During one part, Wick hunts down enemies around his modern-style home, which includes a lot of different glass panels. He shoots and shatters a piece of glass at one point, but pay attention to the scene just seconds later. Yup, the glass is fully intact again, looking brand new as Wick heads off to stop another enemy from getting him. Maybe the glass-shattering kill shot was filmed at a later point and also accounts for the extra 13th man Wick forgot to call for dinner reservations about. One of the more brilliant parts of John Wick is the pacing of the story, showcasing the love and build between John and his wife through a series of quick flashbacks without focusing too much on exposition. At one point, we see a series of shots of their love together and the moment where it takes a turn for the worst. John's wife collapses, but something is a little off about the shot. The whole clip is only a few seconds long, but see if you can spot the major error. Right at the very last moment, after Wick's wife collapses, the cameraman seemed to collapse as well. The shot suddenly shakes and rattles, and the movement was clearly an error, unintended for a professional production. Seeing as it was part of a montage, the editors probably thought that they'd slip the flub in there, but it's highly noticeable the more times you see it. The John Wick movies are set in New York and New Jersey, presenting a lot of crowd control problems when filming, especially as scenes focus on some landmark areas. In a gorgeous overhead shot from the first John Wick, our hero drives from New Jersey into the city of New York with some vengeance on his mind. In the overhead shot, the car cruises through traffic on a pretty crowded bridge. When we cut to the interior of the vehicle, the view changes a little bit. There are literally no other cars located on the bridge with them. Maybe it is an error, but if we saw an angry John Wick driving across the bridge, we'd find the first exit off ASAP, or just brake and let him easily pass by. Willem Dafoe's turn as Marcus was filled with a lot of mixed emotions as we watched the movie. Would the former Green Goblin go full evil and turn on Wick? It turned out he was on the hero side this time around, defending Wick even though it put him in the crosshairs of a vengeful Vigo. Like many of the characters in the trilogy, Marcus meets his end in violent fashion, but when Wick discovers his body, we may question whether he's really dead after all. Let the theories start pouring in. See, watch closely as Wick approaches Marcus. You can see his body breathing ever so slightly. We imagine it was hard for Dafoe to hold his breath for long, especially with the awkward position he's in. One of the oddest errors in the film comes pretty early on and definitely makes you look twice when it occurs. Just 4 minutes into the movie and you'll spot Johnny Boy holding his wife's bracelet and setting it down on a nightstand. Look closely and see your eyes jolt when the error is spotted, huh? Did you find it? Yeah, we all agree. John Wick must have some time travel powers because the clock behind the bracelet jumps from 8 to 10 in the blink of an eye. 2 shots were strangely edited in to create the error, even though the scene could have easily cut away before the clock shifted. The Continental has always been advertised as a safe haven for trained killers, but more often than not, a lot of the action has taken place there. Like the time in the first John Wick where the poor guy just wanted a nap, only to be interrupted by Miss Perkins. Well, like most of his enemies, Wick gains the upper hand and has Perkins in a tough position. Wick forces his hand over her mouth and chin area, but when we go in for the close-up, the hand position has clearly changed. Did Wick do a quick move to hear her answers? No, because we cut right back away to the wider shot and his hand over her chin again. Apparently, Miss Perkins had to deal with multiple takes of a very aggressive John Wick defending himself. Just when Viggo thinks he has John Wick captured, a perfect shot from Marcus gives Wick the opportunity to escape captivity and then be on his way. With his hands strapped behind his back, he must show a lot of flexibility to swing his arms around his feet and then get released. Watch the super fast scene again and see if you can spot the mistake. No, looks pretty clean there. Well, if you slow things down a little bit, you'll see a shoe plop right off as he swings his arms over his leg. Right there on the right side. But when Wick gets back up again, both shoes are on and neatly tied. So not only can the man escape when his hands are tied behind his back, but he is the master of slipping on a pair of shoes. Aurelio runs the car shop where John Wick seeks out his coveted Mustang, and through a flashback scene, we see him have a confrontation with Yosef over messing with John Wick. Look past Aurelio's shoulder and you'll see a hood open with a lamp and a coffee cup underneath it. A couple of quick cuts and both props have mysteriously disappeared. Thankfully they did, because just a few moments later, Aurelio walks over and slams the hood down. He would have spilled coffee everywhere if the cup remained on the car. The gas station scene in John Wick proves that the trained assassin breaks the law in more ways than one. Not only does he have a huge body count to his name, but he doesn't follow the laws from his own home state. Anyone from New Jersey knows how it goes at the gas station. There's no pumping your own gas. But in John Wick, he seems to live beyond the rules, self-serving his gas tank with all the juicy unleaded that it can handle. And thanks to Wick's home and some newspapers at the gas station, there's no denying that he's pumping at a New Jersey location. Thankfully, Officer Jimmy probably lets this infraction slide as well. Okay, enough of John Wick and its mistakes, but no, the video isn't over yet either. Now it's time for a little focus on John Wick Chapter 2. The sequel is filled with some spectacular visuals, including the scene where Cassian and Wick encounter each other on opposite sides of a water fountain. When the water shoots up, the gun shooting starts as well, and you hear the cries and screams by random citizens getting away from the action. Then, just moments later, we see the citizens again walking all casual like nothing has just happened. It's like an old version of Grand Theft Auto, where the characters stroll down the street like they didn't just see you toting a bazooka gun around. In Chapter 2, we see Wick get closer to his new adopted dog, and thankfully, the dog survives when Wick's whole house gets blown to bits. The two decide to take a journey to the city from New Jersey in what must be one heck of a walk. At one point, the two cross over a bridge, but the bridge does not actually connect to New Jersey in any way. This means they would have had to walk around the whole island of Manhattan just to get on the bridge. Nothing like a little cardio before you start taking on other assassins. So far, we've seen glass heal, pillows reform, and John Wick have shoes instantly appear on his feet. And Chapter 2 continues this trend with a magical healing car. In the opening sequence, Wick chases a motorcycle down before causing the rider to crash right into the side of his car, creating all kinds of dents and damage. When Wick steps out of his car and goes to check on the bike rider, the car looks practically brand new again. It's as if the motorcycle did no damage at all. And if you thought they learned their lesson with the first car scene, well, it only takes a few more minutes to spot another healing car error. In this clip, a man rolls over the car, making maximum impact with the windshield. It's only on there for less than a second, but stop right there, and you can see the shattered glass. Now we cut ahead a few seconds, and boom, the car's windshield is fully intact. Nothing to see here, folks, just another pristine car ready for some more action. There are many times in movies where people find errors which aren't actually errors at all. After faulting John Wick so much already, it's time to give one back to the team. The error in question comes during the closing scenes of Chapter 2 when Wick meets up with Winston at the park. As Winston informs John of his excommunicado status, we get a couple of wide shots where you can spot a small table in the bottom corner. Many sites point to the table as some type of film catering, but a single table wouldn't be used for catering, especially right behind where the actors are shooting. The table is authentically New York, selling merchandise like purses and jewelry to passersby. There's no error to see here, folks. But if you're looking for a true error in the previous scene, you would not have been able to figure it out until after you saw John Wick Chapter 3. Winston may be putting Wick on the hit list and on the opposite side of the high table, but he's not all bad. He's giving Wick an hour to get on the run, avoid any nearby assassins, and to formulate a plot to prevent the multi-million-dollar bounty on his head. As Winston tells Wick this, we get a close-up on his watch, which clearly shows it's about to turn 4 o'clock. But at the beginning of John Wick Chapter 3, 3, John actually has until 6 o'clock before the status is officially executed. So John either figured out a way to weasel an extra hour of the deal, or the filmmakers wanted to showcase the dramatic darkness of night and figured we'd just ignore the error. At the end of the day, the John Wick movies are truly about a human love for dogs, and this extends greatly in John Wick Chapter 3. Wick still has his beloved dog from Chapter 2, and at one point he meets up with Sophia, a former ally who has 2 dogs of her own. Or does she actually have more? It gets a little confusing. She clearly has 2 dogs when first meeting with Wick in the movie, but then one of the dogs gets shot dead. There should only be 1 remaining, but when Sophia transports Wick to the desert, she has 2 dogs again. She adopted another dog already, or did we miss a crucial error? Maybe Chapter 4 will make things right again and fix the confusing mistake? Even with all the guns and knives, one of the coolest additions to John Wick Chapter 3 was horses. During the stable attack scene, we saw just how powerful a horse's kick could be on a human skull. The stable in the scene features multiple horses, and with so much action, some trainers obviously had to be there to help. In one of the quick shots, look deep in the background to see one of the trainers help keep a horse under control. With so much action and chaos, the horses could have easily done more damage than they did on screen if those trainers were not positioned correctly. Showcasing the bonds between animals and humans has also been an important part of making an emotional connection with the characters. This is why in the original John Wick, some bacon grease was used on Wick's face to get the puppy to go and lick him. So for John Wick Chapter 3, the same strategy was implemented, but it's the substance on Keanu Reeves' face that is a little more visible. During one of the close-up shots, you can see what looks like peanut butter or something to get the dog to lick him. If we knew John Wick was that desperate for puppy kisses, they could have made the assassin sanctuary at a pet shelter instead. To help prove his allegiance to the High Table and prevent his death, John Wick does the ultimate sacrifice, chopping off his ring finger and then taking the ring along with it. Yikes! The move will forever change Wick and the CG budget for any future movies. But after initially chopping off the finger, we have to question if it was chopped off in the proper location. Later on in the movie, we can see a longer nub, but he chopped it below the ring, meaning the nub would be much shorter than what we see. A black glove would be more than enough to cover up the mistake and prevent it from happening again in any of the John Wick sequels.
John Wick has become something of a pop culture phenomenon, and we can totally understand why. He's awesome! Just look at him go! Pow, 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 pow! John Wick operates in the mysterious world beyond our own, with plenty of mysteries yet to be unearthed. We're sure to learn more when John Wick 4 eventually hits the big screen, but we've managed to dig up a bit more info with the help of some deleted scenes. Like John Wick himself, the movies are finely tuned and don't actually have as many deleted scenes as you might imagine. They get the job done. In and out, no witnesses. I mean, no deleted scenes. Let's dive into the shadowy world of the Continental and John Wick. During the events of John Wick Chapter 2, Keanu Reeves' efficient man of action finds himself in Rome on a mission. It's a great part of the movie, as we get to see a different Continental hotel and John operating remotely in a different part of the world where he's just as recognized from his peers. But Rome has a dark, albeit ridiculous secret about the hidden world that John operates in. Despite being an assassin, John is also a man of God, as evidenced by his tattoos. So it would make sense that he would make a pilgrimage to the Vatican when in Rome. Only John isn't going to the Vatican to talk to God. As it turns out, the Vatican itself is also embedded in John's world. He makes his way to a rather busy building, complete with nuns rushing about. He is granted access, and by declaring the name of his target,
Gianna D'Antonio.
he is given access to His Holiness himself, who seemingly blesses the contract. We can understand why this was ultimately cut from the movie. It doesn't add too much to the narrative. But how nuts is it that the Pope is in on the secret worlds that John inhabits? We have to wonder, are the nuns armed? Does the Pope know some fighting moves? How is he involved? This scene brings up more questions than answers, and we want these questions answered. John Wick Parabellum brought in a whole bunch of antagonists for John to contend with, none more prevalent than Zero. He was a bit of an odd one, to be honest. He was cold and efficient, but he was a total fanboy around John. Played by Mark Dacascos, Zero was tasked by the Adjudicator to bring John down after he was labeled excommunicado. Zero got to have the big finale fight scene with John right after he fought two guys from the Raid movies, so the finale was certainly action-packed. But Dacascos actually is bummed out that some of his scenes were removed from the movie. Stuff he promised was very cool. Specifically, he mentioned there was a scene between him and the Adjudicator that we did not get to see. Dacascos mentioned that a lot of history was also cut from the movie, so there must be something neat that ties back to the Adjudicator and Zero. What this is remains unknown, and we can only speculate, but it's enough to cause the actor to show regret about the final cut. Perhaps the Adjudicator had to test Zero first, and we had a one versus many fight scene, or a shocking revelation was cut in order to be used in Chapter 4. Damascus was hoping the scene would be included on home video special features, but this was not the case, keeping the moment shrouded in secrecy. Part of what makes the John Wick films so great is the great cast of supporting characters that populate the movies. One of the earliest associates we meet in the franchise is Aurelio, the mechanic who owns the shady garage played by John Leguizamo. He takes care of John in his car and has ties to the Continental. In the second film, John is tasked by Santonio D'Antonio, seriously, what a name, to eliminate his own sister. John initially refuses, despite being in possession of a marker which would compel him to undertake any request. Santonio burns down John's house, but that was the tip of the iceberg when it came down to convincing John to honor his blood oath. Santonio and his goons pay Aurelio a visit at his garage, likely before the burning of John's house. Aurelio verbally spars with the Italian crime lord for a bit before Santonio makes his way to John's damaged car. Aurelio states that Santonio cannot buy this car, despite the crime lord insisting he's not interested in buying a muscle car. Aurelio states that the owner has attachment issues towards the car, but Santonio doesn't care about cars. He asks Aurelio where it is, it being his stash of coins that act as a currency in the underworld. Aurelio takes a beating, and Santonio then threatens the lives of all of his employees, which gets Aurelio to give up the stash. Santonio then declares that Aurelio works for him now. It overall doesn't add too much to the plot, as Aurelio doesn't return for the rest of the movie, nor does he appear in Chapter 3, but it's actually really well acted and fun to watch as a sort of short film. Clocking in at just under 2 minutes, this scene actually offers quite a bit of nuance and foreshadowing and includes a guest appearance by Charlie, otherwise known as the Cleaner. He's the guy you pay to clean up any sort of mess, if you catch our drift. And according to Charlie, business is good thanks to the actions of John Wick. The rest of the scene shows Winston and Santonio discussing things while in Rome. From the get-go, it's clear that Winston thinks Santonio is being reckless, but by the end of the scene, we get that Santonio also has no respect for Winston, relegating him to a glorified butler. Winston mentions to Santonio, who is out for blood, that he can't change everything at once, and that there is such a thing as rules. As the head of the Continental in New York, it's rules that govern Winston's life. Naturally, the young and hot-headed Santonio states that rules are meant to be broken. Ironically, the breaking of Continental rules later on in the movie is what will result in Santonio's ultimate demise at the hands of John Wick. Because of Santonio's flagrant disrespects to Winston, we can understand why the big boss of the New York Continental was secretly rooting for John. Sure, they're friends, but John did conduct business on hotel grounds. Yet Winston, no fan of Santonio, would ultimately give John an hour's heads up. This scene helps reinforce Winston's decision at the end of the movie and sets things up nicely. John Wick may be a former renowned man of many talents, but he's since put that behind him, at least come the early moments of the first film. He's married, likes working on his car, and tries to live a normal life. With such a life, things might seem a little more, well, mundane than they once were. So John needs to help pass the time with a hobby. Thanks to a deleted scene from the first movie, we know just what John's hobby is, and it's simultaneously unexpected and totally fitting with the character. This particular scene was filmed, but it wasn't included with the bonus material. Instead, Keanu Reeves actually talked about the scene in question while promoting Chapter 3 Parabellum. He described John's pastime as being a book restorer, fixing up old leather-bound editions. Keanu described the hobby as his vocation, and when you think about it, the hobby may seem totally random at first, but it totally fits with his persona. John is a fairly solitary individual, despite having so many peers. We get the impression he'd rather become a hermit and remove himself from society, just spending time with his wife. By fixing old books, John gets to pay attention to detail and nuance, but to help fix things as opposed to unloading a clip in someone's face. Interestingly, John's passion was specifically restoring old Victorian children's books, and if you keep your eyes peeled around John's house, you'll spot some of those books lurking about. That sums up our brief look at the deleted scenes from the John Wick franchise. Why do you think the film series has been so secretive about deleted scenes? Usually those are included with the Blu-rays, but this seems to be an exception. Could they be saving material for later movies, or do they use most of what they shoot and discard the rest? Let us know what you think and what your favorite deleted scene is. We personally love the Vatican scene, even if it's a little controversial. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and give this video a like. Thanks for watching.